For folks who may not be familiar with the books, kind of a elevator pitch about what they're about, and then I want us to start having a conversation about ways in which there are some really interesting connections between these books.
Okay. Hi guys. So City of Ghosts, which is my middle grade debut, is about a girl who nearly drowns in a river and is pulled out by a boy who just happens to be a ghost. And so now she's not all the way alive and he's not all the way dead. And together they have the ability to cross the veil and to see ghosts. And completely unbeknownst to them, their past parents have just signed on to host a television show, traveling around to the world's most haunted cities. And it's about how these two things collide in very troublesome ways for Cassie.
And then when Cassie has to wrestle with, there's all these stories of ghosts. Her parents, they're lively with these stories of ghosts, and she has to deal with the real thing.
Well, it's really interesting. One of the reasons that I decided to run City of Ghosts is because I was living in Scotland, and I discovered that.
That sounds rough.
Yeah, it was so hard. It was really hard. I fell on that sword for research. But when I discovered something while I was there, my family's British, and I have no British heritage, and I haven't lived there before. And I happened to be living there, and it turned out I was living in a haunted house. And nobody bothered to tell me. And when I asked about 2 months in, when I noticed this house was definitely haunted, things kept happening, and I was like, okay, don't call me crazy here, but like, I'm gonna come to the house because I was like, I think this house may be haunted. And I'm like, yeah, no doubt. And I was like, okay, why did it not occur to you to tell me that this house was haunted? What I got to was a much larger issue, a much larger thing, which is that a lot of my Scottish acquaintances and friends treated ghost stories the exact way you would treat any other anecdote. Everybody had them, they treated them as normal stories. Everywhere I went, I said, oh yeah, I'm writing a story about ghosts. They say, oh, I have a ghost story for you. Let me see people running theme in City of Ghosts. Everywhere they go, when they talk about after they're filming this television show, everyone they meet is like, I have a ghost story for you. And I was fascinated by the normalcy of it, the idea that this was a culture that didn't elevate those stories to this superstitious pedestal. They didn't make of them anything of what they were or what they weren't. And Cassie has a line in the second book when somebody asks her if she's a believer. And she says, you know, it's really easy to not believe until you experience something, and then it's really hard not to. And that's kind of the driving force behind this is it doesn't matter. I can't make you believe in ghosts. That's not my goal, that's not my purpose. But as someone who does believe in ghosts and has had their share of strange experiences, my goal is to just crack open that door for you and make you doubt and make you wonder and make you feel what it might feel like if you did believe in ghosts and you don't already.
So, both of you have written a middle grade book. This is your first one. Why, Matt, you decided to write a book? Why write? Why write this book? Why not write a book for adults or teens or a picture book? And Victoria, you've written many books for grown-ups and teens. What made you decide to tell this story for this age?
I want to write a scary book. Like, I know that's not the silly thing to say. I want to write a scary book, so I wrote it. But this is the best area to write a scary book. Like, in YA, like, okay, but like, is there a romance or is there an adventure? And that's great too. We don't get a lot of YA straight up horror, especially in Castle. And in adult, horror takes a very specific kind of thread. You know, it has to be very syndicated. And I wanted to write something a bit more fantasy, a bit more fantastical, and make it really scary. And it turns out, like, middle grade is the absolute best place to be afraid. Like, no offense to the adults, but like, the children are way better at it than you guys are. And like, they're way better at dealing with fear. They're way better at handling it. They're not afraid of the same things that adults are afraid of, and they can take it in a really fun way. So it's never any question for me that my scariest book is going to be for kids.
I want to be part of the experience.
I love that your book hopefully introduces kids to the idea of fate, and mine introduces us to the idea that dead people are walking amongst them. I'm sorry, please don't want to create that question in the world.
And what you're talking about is really about belief and what is true and how we identify truth, which isn't all
is willing to kind of humor this notion that she has this ghost best friend, and Cassie's father is convinced that Jacob, Cassie's best friend, is not only imaginary, but is kind of like acting out on her behalf. He's very patronizing about it. He's like, how does Jacob feel about the situation? Making very clear that he doesn't actually believe Jacob is there, ever. And so it's also about this idea of how much space you give the characters to experience. Cassie doesn't know her mom does believe that she has a ghost best friend, but she's humoring her, not patronizing her. She's making space for that belief because for Cassie's mom, who's a storyteller, belief is super important. Whereas Cassie's father is about laying the tangible framework. He's the historian. He can set up the story, but he doesn't necessarily believe in the supernatural.
Right, the parallel there in my book is that when Leo tells a story and something appears from the story, other people can't see it.
Yeah.
Only if you've heard the story can you see the creature that's left behind. At least initially, that changed after a while. But at the same time, who's reading this one?
Well, one thing about both belief and faith and whatever form it takes is that it has to be able to stand up when nobody else can verify it. Like, nobody else can see Cassie's best friend. And she just starts to doubt that reality that happens with faith and belief in any measure is that if you're the only one who experience it, you can't justify it to somebody else. How do you know it's real?
So one of the ways in which we convince somebody that something's real is the way that we tell a story. Both of your books involve rich other worlds. I mean, yours is in the very far future, so you have to tell this story about a world that doesn't exist except in your imagination. And when you're telling the story of the ghosts and what's beyond the veil, it has its own rules. And just like any good fantasy does, what's that like to create these incredible fantasies that you have to make real for the reader?
Well, for me, it's a lot of fun. It's also very hard because the great thing about fantasy, at least in my world, where the only law I have to pay attention to is gravity. Like that, everything else I have to make up, which is wonderful. It's like a total control, like you read this world. But it's also difficult because you have to make it consistent, and there's nothing to base it on. In fact, that's this world and another world. So you have to play both ways. I was completely in another framework, and so everything had to be invented, and everything had to connect to everything else. So even though it's not a real world, it still has to feel real and believable, even though it's completely beyond our frame of reference.
One of the things you did that was really interesting was there was this moment where Leo, the main character, he has to prove himself by fighting this beast. And this beast, this creature is not one that, is recognizable in our world. And the weapon, though, is a dagger. And he talks about only having minutes to do something. So there are ways in which you grounded it in my experience and our experience with, things that I was familiar with that anchored it so that I could then absorb this strange beast and these weird powers and like this and all of these, things that I wasn't familiar with that built the fantasy. Good.
No, I write a lot of fantasies. This is my 14th book, and they're all, I have 5 or 6 worlds that I play in. So I spend a good portion of my time designing fantastical environments, and my primary goal is to make them intuitive and believable, and make it so you can very easily step into them, so you don't feel like you need a glossary or a crash course or any form of information that you're not going to get in context in order to enjoy them. And for me, what that comes down to again and again and again, regardless of the kind of world I'm building, is I build it off of reality. So even when I'm building a second world, like in Shades of Magic, it's about building a world that's based in a reality, based on a world that we know. Something like in City of Ghosts, Cassie can walk through the veil. Well, the veil is a version of the world around her at that time. It's just a veil surrounds a ghost. A veil is the ghost's diorama. It's their environment. It's the place where they die and the time that they die. So it's like a little capsule, but it's still space. It's still time. It's still an image, an idea. And I want to make these worlds, as fantastical as they are, really conceivable, really visual, and really interactive. because you can't picture it than I think. You know, so the most important thing to me is go figure out the rules once you're in the world, but I have to get you into that space as seamlessly as possible. And plus, I'm not wanting the world to be strange. I still want the world to be strange. To me, there's no medicine or to this idea that magic, ghosts, supernatural, that it's all real. It's just one step away. It's behind the door. We have to figure out how to open it. And that door is right there. The door is something we can touch. Brew on the other side is the thing we haven't found.
Another thing that I think is an interesting connection between both books is both of the characters, Leo and Cassie, have this amazing power that they're wrestling with, that they're maybe a little annoyed by at the beginning or terrified of, but it comes with it, to quote Spider-Man, enormous responsibility that they have to learn to accept and to engage. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that at all.
Anyone that can go Spider-Man is okay with me. Yes, I mean, that's the journey of that Leo has in this book. So this book is all about his world and what that's like, and coming to terms with this, what he's learned in a sense of affliction, to see him not self-afflicted, but gifted, which he only comes through some help of some life to know who he is, and that the great power that he has, which to him is nothing but annoying, scary, revolting, and an obstacle to claiming the throne, which he thinks is his real destiny. It turns out he has a destiny much, much bigger than that. And then the next book, which is just been completed next year, is all about the world of the enemy, which he has to be thrown into. And there, he discovers that the enemy actually knows more about him, or what it means to be a sinner, than he knows about himself. So there's all sorts of interesting discoveries and revelations that happen there. And there's a third book, which we'll take for next year.
Well, and so when you meet Cassie the first time you see a ghost, she has half the ability that she has for almost a year. She basically, almost a year before, she nearly drowned, and she ended up both kind of alive, mostly alive, and with this dead best friend, making the only she can see. And ever since then, she's been drawn to the veil. She'll notice that she gets this kind of weird feeling, and she's not careful, she'll kind of stumble through this curtain into the ghost realm. And she has no idea why she has this ability. She just thinks it's a weird side effect of what's happened to her. And it's not until she gets to Edinburgh and she meets another person with the same ability and finds out that she's supposed to be a ghost hunter. That like she's supposed to be using this ability to hunt down ghosts and help send them on so they're no longer trapped in their own veil. The problem there is that her best friend is ghosts. And so this ghost hunter's like, first of all, what have you been doing for the last year? Just like sightseeing, just like taking a wander through the veil? And number two, why do you want ghosts like following you around as the best friend? You need to send that thing on like right now. And so Cassie is actually doing pretty well with what she thinks her power is until she figures out when something else tells her what she's actually supposed to be doing with it, and she realizes she's been using it wrong this entire time. She's not sure she wants to use it right. Like she knows she has a purpose, and this girl says, you know, you're back for a reason. You have the second chance, but this is a toll you have to pay. You need to give back to the proverbial like world in this way, and she's not sure what that means for her and for her best friend.
So I made a big oops, and I totally let my SD card get full. Unfortunately, I didn't bring my backup. It's still in the Airbnb, so that was all I could really get. We tried to film some on our phones to kind of fill in the gaps that unfortunately I'll now have. But we just met Victoria Schwab, and that was really cool, and I got her signature on like 7 books. And that's really it. I think we're going to stop somewhere and get some food and go back to the Airbnb and get ourselves all checked out and head back home. So we're at this place now called Raging Taco, and that's what we're gonna have for lunch before we head home, when it's a late lunch. But I thought I'd show you what we're having. Xander's got himself a chicken burrito, and Marty's got what?
No.
Tacos? What kind of tacos?
Beef tacos.
Beef tacos. And I have this ridiculous, huge, like, oh my gosh, look at this. It's bigger than my head. And it's a Jamaican jerk burrito. We'll see how it is. But I did want to say, I think my highlights for today had to be, one, Tashi. Meeting her was really just absolutely amazing, and she is so pretty too. Oh my gosh, and so sweet, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. All right, so I'm gonna eat now, and then we're gonna make our way back to the room and pack up and head out. Hello, my lovelies. So as you can tell, I'm back home and I'm beat, but I had such an amazing weekend, or a few days anyway. It was just so nice. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a big thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button down below. Bye!